Thank you very much. I'm not German. I'm sure it's very nice being German, but I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm from the UK.
You're forgiven.
Yes, thank you. I'm not even Dutch, although there is from where I come from, in the north of England, there are certain similarities between our dialect and Northern Dutch dialects, but being an academic linguist, I shan't go into those lexical and semantic similarities. It's a bit too complicated. Excuse me. I'm a professional linguist. I have a doctor of linguistics, a professor of linguistics in Sofia in St. Petersburg, and my whole life has been dedicated to languages, which is why I first came to Bulgaria in 1987 to learn Bulgarian. But I'll go back a bit further before that to when I first met Bulgarians, my first contact with Bulgaria, and my first understanding of what it is to be Bulgarian and to have friends who are Bulgarians. Now, I was a student in Russia. I was sent by Bristol University to study in Russia for a couple of years, and I had a lot of friends, and notably some Bulgarian friends who became very good friends. And one particular friend was called Marius, and he was a student of classical Russian literature, and we were very, very close friends. And we'd meet each evening, we'd drink and we'd talk. And there was a couple of very, very attractive Bulgarian girls who lived in a room just down the corridor. And we spoke Russian, our lingua franca was Russian. And so I said to Marius, tell me a couple of words in Bulgarian so I can go and impress these two very attractive Bulgarian girls. And he said, what do you want to say in Bulgarian? I'll write it down for you. Now, those of you who know Bulgarians very well know that's a huge trap to set for yourself. So I said to Marius, I said in Russian, well, for example, a very simple phrase like in Russian, have you got anything for lunch? The first phrase that came into mind. I said, oh, okay. And I knew that Bulgarian was close to Russian at the time. And I thought, well, it's going to be similar, but I don't know exactly what it means. So I wrote down on this piece of paper a few words. And I read them to myself in Cyrillic. And I walked down the corridor, knocked on the door, and I said, are there any Bulgarians here, apart from those?
Partially.
Well, I don't want to upset your ears. So I knocked on the door, and the two very, very attractive girls, Rusica and Galia. And I said in Bulgarian, Добър ден. Имате ли нещо за... And the word is very similar to a Russian word. Because in Russian, the word for lunch is обед. But if you turn two letters round, you get имате ли нещо за And they fell about laughing. And I had no idea that I was inviting them to have carnal knowledge with me. So that was my first connection with Bulgarians. So I went back to Marius and said, what have you done? And I said, no. That's how Bulgarians always greet each other. So if you like, I can write that down for you on a piece of paper. So next time you meet a Bulgarian, you can take it with you and read it out. But I don't recommend it. So after that, I spent a few years in Russia with Bulgarian friends, and I went back to Britain. I taught Russian literature at university, and then came a possibility to come back to Bulgaria in 1987, which shows how long I've been here, with various intervals. I've been here since 1987. And I came back on a language course in 1987 one summer through the British Council, and I arrived by plane. And this was the very cruel greeting by Bulgaria at that time. It was under communism, of course. And I arrived at the airport, and being a lone male tourist student at the time, in my late 20s, I must have looked very suspicious. So I was taken to one side, given a full body search, and undressed, and went through all my bags and everything. And when I came out, I was due to be met by somebody to take me to Veliko Tarnovo, to the university for a course. And of course, by the time I got out, it was dark, it was deserted, there was no one at Sofia Airport. And at that time, in 1987, Sofia Airport was a very small, tin hangar in the middle of nowhere, not the place it is now. And it was deserted, absolutely deserted. And I was there by myself with my rucksack, deserted in the middle of summer at 11 o'clock at night, not knowing what to do. So I had to use my initiative. I managed to find a taxi who was very pleased when I offered 5 Deutschmarks to take me somewhere, which was a huge amount at that time. I said, what do I do? I'll go to the British Embassy, which is the nearest point of call, because I was here on a British Embassy scholarship. So I went there and rang the duty bell, saying I've been abandoned in the middle of Bulgaria, which was not the country it is now. It was a very dark, dour, communist country at the time, and it was 11 o'clock at night when everything was dead. And so I knocked on the embassy door, and I was greeted very coldly, unwillingly, grudgingly. And I said, who are you? And I said, well, I'm here on a British Embassy scholarship to go to Veliko Tarnovo. I said, we don't know about you. And I said, well, what am I going to do? They're supposed to meet me at the airport, and I'm due to be in Veliko Tarnovo at the moment, but no one met me, so what am I going to do? And I said, well, go and find a hotel. Thank you very much. So, at that time, finding a hotel in Bulgaria was very difficult, because without napravlenia, you know what that means, without the little official document, you couldn't find a hotel. So I tried some hotels, no one would have me. Went back to the embassy. They said, well, go somewhere else, being very helpful at the embassy. By this time, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. So they say, go to Sofia University, to the student hostels in Drvenica. And this was the great help from the British Embassy. Any diplomats here? No diplomats here? Good. And so I went to Drvenica. And at that time, there was like a special central office of the Komsomol, the Communist Youth Organization, which was organizing these summer seminars. And they said, oh, no, you've got to go to Veliko Tarnovo. I said, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. How do I get to Veliko Tarnovo? Oh, I don't know. That's not our problem. You haven't got napravlenia. The first word I learnt in Bulgarian was napravlenia. And so you haven't got napravlenia, so you've got to go back to your embassy. So I went back to my embassy, and I said, well, look, no one wants me. And I said, well, I suppose you'd better stay here. By this time, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, so I stayed for 3 hours, 4 hours on the floor of the embassy, and very grudgingly, they let me stay there. And in the morning, I actually got the train and ended up in Veliko Tarnovo. Even without my napravlenia, I managed to get there. Now, despite that cruel welcome, I must say I've had 30 years in Bulgaria now, marvelous 30 years. Bulgaria has given me so many things which I wouldn't have been able to achieve perhaps in any other country. Not just being bilingual by now, also trilingual. I speak Russian, I speak Bulgarian, I speak French, I speak English, of course. And I speak Turkish and I speak Macedonian. And it's given me wonderful opportunities to learn these languages. And having set up to work, I've worked for 15 years for the British and Bulgarian governments on various pre-accession European Union projects. But for the past 10 years, I've been working as a professional linguist, and even before that. But it's given me marvelous opportunities. I've worked for presidents, I've worked with the prime ministers, I've worked with British royalty, if that's something to be proud of at the moment. But I've worked with from the last Bulgarian communist president. I worked with him. I worked with President Stoyanov. I've worked with all manner of people, which has been so enriching for me. But I remember a couple of interpreting things which I'll tell you about, which have been very interesting. Now, I got a call from a friend who was an impresario, musical agent, and he said, we've got a problem with some British musicians at Sofia Airport, and we can't sort it out. Can you go and help them interpret and sort out their problems? So I didn't know who they were. So I go to Sofia Airport to the VIP section, and I open it. Boy George. Do you know who Boy George is?
Of course.
Yes, Boy George. And I looked at him and I said, I recognise that face. Who's that? And of course, in his passport it says George O'Connelly or something. And I said, you're Boy George, aren't you? And he said, yes, I'm Boy George. I'm stuck here in Sofia with no instruments. Balkan Airways had brought him to Bulgaria to take part in a festival, but they sent his instruments, to Belgrade. So he said, well, I can't do anything. So I sat in Sofia airport trying to organise his instruments to be transported back from Belgrade to Sofia. And had a very nice time, actually, a very nice person. And then after that, a couple of weeks later, I got another phone call, said, can you help us again? We've got someone else stuck at Sofia airport. And I said, well, okay. And I said, can you tell me who it is? He said, no, we're not going to tell you who it is. You get there and you'll see. And I arrive, and it was LaToya Jackson. But the strange thing was, Boy George was really open, he was really friendly, and LaToya Jackson was stuck in the airport. But I never actually saw her. She was surrounded by lawyers, bodyguards, I don't know how many other people in her team. And when I had to interpret for her, I'd speak to a lawyer, who'd speak to a bodyguard, who'd speak to somebody else. And so it was like going through 5 different people to get anything communicated to her. Now, of course, there have been times when I've been involved in rather more sensitive things. I remember I was doing some work. I have done work for the British Embassy for various departments, and they sent me to interpret for a military delegation at the General Staff of the Bulgarian Army. And the first meeting was very tense because it was before Bulgaria had joined NATO, and I shan't go into it, but after the meeting, the British general called me out and said, you do realise that we're going to have to shoot you now? I said, well, who's going to interpret at the next meeting? Then things worked out very nicely after that very tense meeting. And that evening, we all went to the staff restaurant of the General Staff of the Bulgarian Army with the General Staff of the British Army, lots of 4 or 5 generals. And when you're interpreting at a meal like that, you watch the food. One plate comes to you, you carry on talking, it's moved away, and you can't eat. The next plate comes to you, put in for you, in front of you, and it's taken away, and you haven't eaten anything at all. And they noticed I wasn't eating. And the British general said to the Bulgarian general, let's stop talking for a moment and let the interpreter eat something, let David eat something. So they stopped for a moment, they brought me something to eat, and then in a moment's awkward silence, the Bulgarian general said, how's your family? Thinking that if he wasn't talking about professional things, it was different. Anyhow, during the meal, they got drunker and drunker and drunker and drunker. And I was still interpreting, soberly. And the meal had been going on about 5 hours, and I'd gotten very tired by now, just hoping that someone would say, time to go home. And the Bulgarian general, who was very drunk, started singing a Bulgarian folk song. And he said, translate. I said, I can't translate that. And the British general said, what did he say? He said, I don't know, he's singing, he's drunk. The Bulgarian general said, translate. And I said, I can't translate. After he sang his song, he started talking about Bulgarian national costume. Now, he started talking about northern Bulgarian national costume. And the British general said, what's he saying? In the north of Bulgaria, the national costume consists of... Then he went on to north-east Bulgaria. And he started going around every single part of Bulgaria of different national costumes. And I was looking just for sympathy, succor, support, please stop. By this time, the British general was very, very drunk, and he was Scottish. And he said, let me tell you about Scottish kilts. In the north of Scotland, and he started going on about every single clan in Scotland and the different types of kilts. So after about 1 o'clock, I just said, I can't do it anymore. You carry on drinking. And they were so drunk they didn't notice my absence, so I just left them. Another occasion, which was interesting, you were mentioning 1996 and the protest, the tumult, and the pseudo-civil war which took place. A lot of you, none of you were here then, I imagine, but in 1996, this was a time of 2,000% inflation. People were leaving Bulgaria like rats leaving a sinking ship. It was very, very difficult. And I just happened to be walking past the National Assembly building on the night of January the 6th, 1996, and it was the time, 1967, that's right, and it was just the time when the protests were starting, and I happened to have a mobile telephone with me, and I phoned my friend in CNN, saying, you know what's happening, and she started broadcasting directly from what I was telling her in front of the National Assembly. And it was one night of quite serious protests. And it was quite good-hearted, but we were in the middle of a couple of thousand people all pushing forward, and you're trying to also transmit something on your telephone. It was quite frightening at times. Anyhow, the next day I got a call saying Christian Amanpour from CNN is coming to Bulgaria. You know who Christian Amanpour is, I presume. Very famous American journalist. At that time she's still very famous, of course, but she was always being sent to war zones. She's just been to all around Yugoslavia and Serbia and to Belgrade. We're having protests at the same time. And so I went to the airport, picked her up with with a truck full of equipment, and she said, "Take me to see the blood." And those were words, "Where's the blood?" I said, "There's no blood." It's not like Yugoslavia. It's been a very civil protest. So we went in front of the National Assembly. There was nothing happening there. There's no one there. It was empty. And they said, "Have we come to the right place?" And it was like 2 days after everything had happened. And so I had to think of a program for Christian Amanpour for 3 days for CNN. So the first place I took her to was a pig farm. So Christian Amanpour, her cameraman, her soundman, I took her to a pig farm just outside Dilienci. He said, "I want to see real life." So Christian Amanpour was dressed in her journalistic outfit, ready to go to war with her boots and her flak jacket and everything. And I said, "This is a Bulgarian pig farm. Make it of it what you want." And this was broadcast the next day, 7 minutes of Bulgarian pigs, proving that Bulgaria had overcome its protests in 2 days and was on its way to reform. And so what else can I say? Advice. My advice to you is learn Bulgarian. Learn Bulgarian. Enjoy being here, because it's a country which has given you the most marvelous opportunities. And I'm sure that if you are open to it, if you learn the language, it'll give you the most marvelous opportunities as well. But learn the language and learn that this is, and this is. Thank you very much. I didn't tell you about my horses. Just one. I've mentioned my horses. I'm passionate about horses. Just 2 minutes more. I have one of my horses. I'm also a professional trainer of horse riding, jumping, and dressage. And I worked with the Bulgarian national team to train them. And one of my horses, my favourite horse, the one which I won the Bulgarian national championships on, is called Minister. If you look at my Facebook page, it's a beautiful white horse. It's called Minister. Now, when I was working on a government project, I was once waiting in the offices of the National Assembly, waiting for a meeting with the Minister of Finance at the time. And the phone rings, and it's my coach, my trainer. And my horses just had their vaccination. And Minister, my white horse, is very frequently, he has a bad reaction to vaccination. So I'm sitting in the reception room of the National Assembly, waiting for a meeting with ministers. And I say on the phone in Bulgarian to all the people standing around, "How's the minister's neck? Is it still swollen?" So everybody looks around. He's the minister's doctor, or what is he? Thank you.